So you've got a great website. Your marketing team spends hours driving visitors to it and nurturing them into leads. And your sales team spends hours collecting, qualifying, organizing, and chasing those leads. Sales wants to focus on what they do best. Selling. And marketing wants to get on with what they do best, creating innovative campaigns. But how do you make both teams happy? The solution is marketing automation.
Hi, welcome back to this episode of CMS Connected, and we're about to tackle the question, is the suite approach to CMS dying? I'm Butch Stearns, joined alongside once again by Scott Liewehr, and we welcome in our special guest, Pelz Sharpe from Digital Clarity Group. Alan, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Great to have you here.
Happy to be here.
Tell us a little bit about yourself for people that don't know you. When it comes to this subject in the CMS space, you're very passionate about this, aren't you?
I'm very passionate about it. I've been involved in it for a long time as an analyst, as a consultant, and actually starting out as an end user. So, you know, I've done it wrong in many different ways, so I've got a lot to share with people.
So we want to dive right into this subject, but you know Alan very well. Why is he the perfect guest to have as we tackle this subject?
Look, Alan is modest in his description of himself. He literally wrote the first book on the web CMS industry. So he knows an awful lot about this, and not just about web CMS, but about enterprise content management and many of the other periphery capabilities around that one might include when we talk about the notion of a suite. So I think he's the perfect person.
So Alan, let me ask you the question directly that we're talking about. Is the suite approach to CMS dying? If you want to frame the question, frame what you find interesting about the question, or just answer it.
Well, I think there's a couple of things here. I mean, one, that's a question that gets asked every so often, right? Every few years that one comes up. And, you know, if we're to give an answer, you could give either way, right? Yes, it is. No, it isn't. But I'll say yes, it is.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a challenging time for the industry.
So why is the suite approach to CMS, to web CMS, dying?
I think the reason it's dying is because at the end of the day, it's a little bit like ERP systems in the late 90s. Hey, this is how we all work, and we'll all work the same way. So these suites all starting to look like one another. But that's not how businesses work. Some people are really focused on the customer relationship and the data there. Others are still focused on email marketing. And others, let's be honest, they're just figuring out what they're going to do with their web and mobility. So I think there's a lot of different requirements out there, and one size doesn't fit all.
So then does that mean that the counterpoint is also true, that if the suite is dying, are we back into, again, the rise of the best of breed?
I think we are at the moment, but as I say, this is a kind of question that gets asked every so often. So, you know, I think it's cyclical. At the moment, though, yeah, I think so. I mean, if we look at digital marketing, absolutely, it's best of breed. You know, and even when you start looking at it from a data perspective, you definitely still have best of breed CRM out there. And analytics tools.
So Alan, let me ask you this question, because you are focused on the end users now, right?
Very much so.
So I want it all, right? I'm an end user. I want a suite that offers all the capabilities that I can do. Yet when I do that, oftentimes I find there's limitations. Or on the other end, if I have a best of breed solution, I very quickly find out that I need certain add-ons or certain things to be able to do them well. How do I get the best of both worlds? Whether the suite approach is dying or not, if I'm on either side of that, how do I get the best of both worlds? How do I get everything that I want?
Well, the bottom line is you don't. It's about compromises. It's about finding something that's going to work for you. Because if you take a suite, everything in that suite is not going to be best of breed, right? It can't be.
It's not what Adobe tells us.
It's not what anybody will tell you if they're selling you it, right? But I mean, if you go to the high end, you go to an Oracle or something, you know, is everything they do perfect? No.
Yeah.
Right? So you're just not going to get that. What you have to find out is what's critical to me and focus on that.
Okay, so I'm going to say something now. You tell me if you think that this is right. I'm going to say to you that in the last 30 seconds, you might have convinced me that there will be a bit of a rise of a best of breed capability. But I think to the end user, to the end buyer ultimately, that maybe the suite is not necessarily created by the vendor, but the suite might be created by the service provider who bundles things together themselves and creates a managed service, essentially, of a number of capabilities. Do you buy that?
I think some service providers, some hosting environments will be building those out for sure. But that really gets to the nuts and bolts of it. What is a suite? Yeah? Is it just something in somebody's marketing? right? I mean, hey, I've got all these products. Why don't I sell them as one and make them look like they're one? You know, if you remember back to the autonomy days, everything was idle. Regardless of what it was, it could have been records management. It was idle records management, right?
Sure.
So here was this fantastic suite, which wasn't a suite. So, yeah, what is a suite?
Yeah. So then how about this? I think let's take a step back. Let's answer the question if we're trying to help the audience here and we're looking at it through their vantage point. How should they be making the decision about which is better for them, which approach to take, whether or not they need best of breed capabilities, whether they need a suite approach? How should they even look at this whole problem?
Well, there's different ways of answering that. I think, to be honest, if you're a small organization, you know, if you're not huge, you're an SMB, an SME or whatever, let's be honest, probably a suite does make sense because you don't have the capabilities to build and bolt all of these things together. So if somebody's done it for you already, why not go for that? If you're into a larger organization, I think you've just got to figure out and be honest about it. What is most important to me and where is my organization coming from, right? Am I really all about the content? Or am I really about analyzing the data? Just finding out where you fit into these things, and then you may well make a different decision. You know, a Coca-Cola is going to make a very different decision to a Midwest tiling company. You know, I mean, one size is never going to fit all. And exactly that is going to be the case when you're talking about suites, because, as we've said already, are they even suites? Or are they actually just selling you a bunch of products that might work together and might not?
Oh, that's partially valid.
You are watching CMS Connected. I'm Butch Stearns. He's Scott Liewehr of Digital Clarity Group. Alan Pelz Sharpe of DCG is alongside. We're tackling the question of the suite approach in the CMS industry and whether it's dying or not. Alan, you keep going back to what's critical to me. You keep going back to what's important to me. Let's go to the vendor side and what, Scott, where you were heading with this. So it seems to me the vendors who are going to survive and thrive here need to look out for their clients' best interest. So I guess my question is, if there is a best-of-breed approach, if there is a solution that focuses on marketing automation or focuses on something that is critical to me, what advice do you have for vendors? How do they build the right CMS solution around that, whether it's a suite approach or whether it's not? How do they do that and focus on what's critical to their clients?
It's a great question, and I think there's actually a relatively straightforward answer to it. You've got to build something which attaches to, addresses, however you want to put it, measurable business processes, right? If you think about it, you're building a business application. You're applying technology to a business activity. If it helps somebody get their job done better, you'll have customers. If you're selling something because it's hot and cool and it's great technology, you're going to struggle. And that seems so obvious, but when you look at the marketplace, not everybody's following that advice.
You know, I want to comment from you on that because, again, to me that seems like such obvious advice, but the key word is measurable. And when it comes to a system like this, how many times do we go into client meetings or even internal meetings and we really don't set KPIs? We really don't say, how are we judging success at the end of a quarter, at the end of a campaign, at the end of whatever that we do that? How key is that? That really is the key.
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely valid. You, first of all, the funny thing is, in our society now, where we've got financiers finance folks who are requiring ROI up front and you to make such a business case, yet there's never any follow through into whether or not that business case was actually ever realized, right? There's so much upfront red tape that you've got to go through, tying your purchase idea into some strategic goal. All of that's always required, yet there's never any follow through back as to whether or not you hit that mark or not. Because like you say, there are very few kind of metrics that are set along the way as to what you've got necessarily to go do, what success is, how do you define what success is.
So which vendors are doing it right? Whether you don't want to mention them by name, when the vendors are doing it right, how are they building systems that allow people to be measurable, allow to focus on the right things?
Well, it sounds like a cliche, but it is all about the data. At the end of the day, if we take our industry and we roll the clock back 10 years, 5 years, it was all about the content. Content was king, right? Today, data's king. Absolutely. So, are you in marketing and you're all about building out a great presence? That's all cool. But are you generating more leads? Are those leads actually converting? Are you generating the right kind of leads? Yeah. Do you have insight into your customers? I mean, fair or not, that's what's going to be measured. And that's more and more what's going to be measured.
So here, I don't know if this is a plug or not. I don't think this is a plug, but I mean, this is why I care so much about looking at these service providers, right? Because when you buy from a vendor, you're buying just merely you're buying the technology, yes? Yeah. And when you're buying from a service provider, you're buying a solution which ultimately is supposed to achieve something. And the measurables, I think, you can hold a service provider accountable for, but I don't know that you can hold an Adobe, a Sitecore, a Kentico, anybody that you cannot hold them accountable for anything other than did you deliver the product or not to me?
Absolutely.
Like, meaning, do I have the license agreement or not? That's about it.
No, you're right. But I mean, again, if we roll the clock back, when you implemented some of these systems back in the day, some of them didn't work. Right? Today, they all pretty much work. Right? Yeah. So the fact is, I'm building an application to meet your specific requirement. The technology, let's be frank, it's 20% of the equation. Yeah. Do I actually understand what you're doing? Can I meet those requirements? Can you use it once I leave you to it? That's where it's at today.
So we know, Alan, from doing the research that we've done, that many organizations leave an awful lot of functionality that they buy on the table.
Yes.
Yes? Is that part of your argument for kind of why the suites die? Is that they buy these lots of capabilities, only use some portion of it? Is that why? Is it extra fluff? Or is there some other reason?
I think in many cases, as I say, it's cyclical, right? So we go through these cycles where it's going to be suites, next time it's going to be best of breed. But what suites tend to do is leave a bad flavor in somebody's mouth, okay? The taste is there because, hey, I bought all of that and I used what? 20% of that functionality, and you charge me how much? Next time, am I going to do that? No. Next time, I'm going to buy just what I need. But to your point, right, it goes around because suddenly you find yourself shorthanded and you don't have the technology. So then you go back to buying the suite.
Again, you are watching CMS-Connected. Alan Pelz Sharpe from Digital Clarity Group is alongside Scott Liewehr, Butch Stearns. In this episode, we're talking about the suite approach to CMS and whether it's dying. I have a question for both of you. So what do I do as an end user? Whoever wants to tackle this first, let's start with, I guess, Alan. What do I do as an end user here if I have a certain system in place and I'm overwhelmed at the prospect of trying to get it heading in the right direction? What do I do? Where do I start?
Do you know, that's such a fantastic question because that's actually the case, right? That's how it is 9 times out of 10. This isn't new stuff. People have systems in place. They've built them up over the years. And the truth is, sometimes you have to tell people, I know you hate it, but you may as well live with it because the cost, the complexity, the risk of moving, it's not worth it. Just live with it. You know, it's worked this long. And for others, well, you're going to have to take on that risk, that complexity. But now we're talking about migration. You know, we're talking about re-engineering business processes. So if that's the right thing to do, make sure you've got enough money in your pockets, enough time, and the right people in place to do it because technology isn't going to solve that for you.
Yeah, I think that it's definitely true that I think back to an original point that Alan made, which is look at what your needs are. If you've got some really deep needs in the way of getting your arms around data or analytics or something like that, then that might be a place where it's more willing that one might be more willing to go and rip and replace to get yourself the perfect solution for you. And then some of the other things, maybe you can live with the fact that the marketing automation capability that you've got is just okay for you because you're not using it to its fullest extent anyway, right? So you might focus on pulling some things and leaving others.
So it seems to me what we've evolved this conversation into from an end user standpoint is that the fundamental question is still there no matter where you are along this CMS journey. You still need to ask that question of what approach is best for me, whether the suite approach is dying or not. Am I at a point now I have to take a step back, as hard as it may be, no matter how much I've invested in time, resources, or money in a system? Am I going forward with a suite approach or a best of breed? And if it is best of breed, what is critical to me? What's fundamental that I need? Am I on track with that?
You are. Yeah. You are on track. And the big, what we haven't really talked about here too is the different sizes and types and complexities of businesses that are out there and what tend to be. It's certainly true that the smaller organizations don't necessarily need deep capabilities that are found in most of the best of breed tools. Would you agree that that's true?
Absolutely, and probably it's not insulting, it's just factual. They don't have the skills to use them anyway.
Right.
or the resources.
And the opposite is probably also true, although not always. I think the opposite is maybe in question as to whether or not, if you're a larger organization, does that then mean that you tend to go best of breed? I'm not so necessarily sure.
I think that's the reality. As a larger organization, you do tend to go best of breed. But I think, here's the irony of this whole discussion. It's usually not either or, it's usually both. So if we take a large organization, they've got suites, but they've got best of breeds all over the place as well.
Valid.
You know, they generally have 2 or 3 email campaign systems running.
That's right.
They've got stuff all over the place.
That's right.
So, again, it's not as simple as that.
So it seems to me, and we morph into this on this show to this point often, and I think rightfully so. If I'm out there and I'm an end user, or even if I'm a vendor, I'm almost saying help. Like, where do I turn? By the way, disclaimer here, folks. This is where Scott talks about the need for the right analyst to make the digital transformation
Scott has never done that before.
But you know what, Scott? Seriously, it is true, isn't it? More so than ever, you need business partners.
I mean, when I started out as an analyst and I was writing that famous book on WCM, the fact is it was all about the technology. It was real nuts and bolts. Listen, most of that works today. Some of it's different, some of it's better than others. But people still haven't addressed the true business problems. I mean, why are those licenses sitting on the shelf and not being used?
We've talked about that before. Yeah, we've said this before. The delta between kind of where organizations or customers tend to be and where the vendors tend to be is huge, and it's not. So there's 2 parts to that. One part is between what the kind of vendors say they can do versus what they can actually do, which, as we've said, is narrowing. Marketing is always going to be ahead of product, but to some degree, the much bigger delta is between where the products are actually capable of getting an organization and where the organization, what they're doing with it. That's a huge delta, and that's what, as you say, business partners tend to kind of help you fill that gap.
Absolutely,
right?
and if we take, examples of people I've worked with just recently. Oh, they're going to go to the cloud because that's going to work so much easier. No, it doesn't make the slightest bit different. That's just somebody's software running on somebody else's hardware. I mean, you've still got the basic problems. How am I going to configure this? How am I going to manage this? How am I going to build this to meet my specific needs? And that's where most of the money is spent too.
Right. So a couple minutes left in this segment as we talk about is the suite approach to CMS dying, but we've evolved this conversation now to a point about going forward. So what advice do both of you have for going forward with your CMS system, whether it is the suite approach, whether it is best of breed, and where does technology fit into this? Because again, you guys keep going back to this. It is about the technology, but it really isn't. It's still about tried and true business practices and what's critical to you and what you're going to measure success and how that technology is going to help you solve those business problems, isn't it?
It is. It is indeed. It's all of those things. If we're wrapping up here, I'm going to say that Alan took the side where he said that yes, it is, that the best of breed is, that the suite approach is dying. I'm going to go opposite that. I'm going to say that I don't think that it is dying. I think that, in fact, there's an awful lot of suites that are out there that are going to continue to thrive and people are going to continue to buy them. You're going to see the WordPresses of the world even, that might have been in the small scale, add more capabilities to them, I believe. So I think suites, but I think there are so many options out there for so many different people that certainly I hear the argument that best of breed will continue to rise again as well.
And to agree to disagree, I mean, Scott's absolutely right. They're all going to add more and more and more functionality, that's a given. Yeah. Whether that's actually a suite, though, I think that's the challenge. And it comes right back to what we were talking about at the beginning. Just because somebody tells you they have a suite of technology, you want to really look at it. Was it built up because they bought 10 different companies? Are they still 10 different pieces of software on different codes, not particularly well integrated? I mean, so again, from a buyer perspective, really look closely at what you're buying and get really good advice. I mean, because the marketing, as Scott said, is typically way ahead of the reality.
So the suite approach may or may not be dying when it comes to CMS. The best of breed approach may or may not be dying. We thank you, Alan, for being a part of this segment of this show. You clearly are passionate about this subject, and it's something that's ongoing in your life and everybody else's. If people want to contact you, or if they want to find out what you're into going forward, how do they reach out to you? How do you prefer
the
that?
Usual way, Twitter, LinkedIn, or just email me directly at DCG, Pelz Sharpe at digitalclaritygroup.com.
There you go. We thank you for being a part of this segment of CMS-Connected. We have much more to come on this show at CMS-Connected.com.
Your job is to cut through the noise. To succeed, you need to reach out to your target audiences in real time with messages that speak to them. You can't let technology get in the way of your brand. That's the spirit. First Spirit is a powerful solution that helps you effectively communicate and engage with your target audience. Get an awesome ROI. Success in the market means your message got through to the right people at the right time in the right way. And that's why you need First Spirit. Get started with digital marketing. Visit www.espirit.com now.